And look at this, everyone. Mike teases
Shut up.
me. I got a notepad. I got a pen.
You got tired of me ridiculing you at the start of every video on Instagram.
Yeah, no one likes a bully.
Yeah, that's right. Hey, I just bully you right into what I want you to do. So good.
It's the kind of guy he is, people.
Biz Buds.
You're listening to Biz Buds. Super authentic, actionable advice.
We're going to open the kimono and show you what's inside.
I'm scared to see inside Mike's kimono.
Hey, it's Mike and Tom with Biz Buds.
If you like geeking out over business, marketing, and entrepreneurship, this is the podcast for you. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Biz Buds. This is episode 15, and we're going to be talking all about how to nail the job interview. I am joined by my illustrious biz buddy, Mr. Mike Janda. What's up, Mike?
Super grateful to be here. Thanks, Tom. We're still in quarantine right now and just kind of navigating the throngs of this challenge in the world right now.
Yes, we certainly are. And for anyone who watches the video, I don't know if you can see Mike in the background. This is like when my fiance and I first met.
You look like a little kid.
Yeah, incredibly young. This ridiculous long hair.
Yes.
So I might have to get something to cover that up for future weeks. Really.
It's good.
But yeah, today interviewing. I tried thinking about this number the other week, and I couldn't figure it out without really digging back into our records. But I think that we have employed quite a large number of people, because we've been going nearly 7 years as a business, and our team is nearly 20 people now. And over the years, you obviously get a degree of churn. People leave, you get new people, and so on. So I think it's entirely likely it could be, even near 100 people that have been employed over those 7 years. And to get to that 100, we have easily interviewed hundreds of people.
Yeah. I did a calculation on mine, and mine was 168 people employed over the run of my career, of my agency career. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you did, let's say 168 times 5 interviews per, that's 840 interviews to employ 168 people. So it's been a lot of time sitting in interview rooms, looking at, especially creative professionals, but interviewing anybody to gauge whether they're the right fit for our organization. So yeah, I'm with you.
It's safe to say, between us, we've probably interviewed well over 1,000 people.
Oh, easily.
All right. So we got a degree of credibility, I like to think, on this topic.
Yes.
And I don't really delegate the interviews, or I do now with first stage ones, but I'm always there for final interview. So, I've sat in a lot of interviews. I've done a lot of phone interviews myself. Given that the title this week is How to Nail the Interview, maybe it could be interesting to show both sides, because how to nail getting hired, but equally there's probably people listening who actually are thinking about hiring someone, so we could do that side too. Yeah,
I like it. Whenever I share advice about how to nail the interviewing advice or job application advice, getting hired advice, I always intermingle in the perspective of the business owner. Here's what they're thinking when you're going in for the interview, because it's so good for the interviewee, the potential candidate, to know what the interviewer is thinking and what they're trying to do. So do you want to start with that? I mean, I can talk to that for a second. The employer, if you get the interview, I think that this is something that's really critical. If you get the interview, you've already passed the check boxes. You've already checked the boxes on whether you have the skill set to do the job or not.
Yeah.
They've looked at your resume, they know your experience, they've seen the things that you've done in the past, and they've already determined that, okay, because they've worked at these 3 places and had this set of responsibilities, as long as that is true information, they have the skill set to be employed here and do the job that we have to do. So a lot of times you're not going there to sell your skill set. You're going there to sell yourself as a fit within their organization, a cultural fit, an ambition fit, proactiveness. They're looking for things like that more than they are trying to determine whether you can even do the job or not, because according to your resume, you can do the job. What are your thoughts
I agree
on that? Yeah.
completely. I'd say at least 90% is just likability, how much
Yeah.
you trust the person, the gut feel you get from them.
Yeah, and do they fit
throw
within the
occasional
team?
Massively. And, I
Yeah.
can get to how we interview these days from a cultural standpoint as well, because we've got quite a unique process, I could
good.
call it. So,
Yeah.
so where should we start? Should we start from the interviewee's perspective?
Okay.
Give some tips.
Yeah, let's just dig in right to the tips for the interviewee. So you submitted your application, you sent your resume in, you get the phone call from the potential employer saying, okay, we want to schedule an interview. Now what happens?
Cool. So I feel like from both sides, we're going to have so many tips. I know we normally do our tennis match at the end. Should we just do that for the whole episode?
Yeah, it'll
Hopefully
be the
it won't
whole
be too
episode.
dry.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Because we could go all day on this. And look at this, everyone. Mike teases
Shut up.
me. I got a notepad. I got a pen.
You got tired of me ridiculing you at the start of every
Exactly.
video on Instagram.
Yeah, no one likes a bully.
Yeah, that's right. Hey, I just bully you right into what I want you to do. So good.
It's the kind of guy he is, people. This, and it is so incredibly rare that you really stand out in a very positive way. And this can be all kinds of stuff, but we've interviewed people where they come in and they're like, oh my God, I stalked your whole website. I went on your about page. I feel like I know the team. Like they're calling out stuff from our blog archives 2 years ago, and they've clearly gone through and like read everything and looked through our social profiles. And when someone shows that, my first thought is, well, they clearly really care about working here. They have, put in the effort, which is a good indication of their work ethic and how they operate. And they clearly feel like this is going to be a perfect place for them to work, because if they dug through everything and they're still super keen to be here, that's a great sign. So I think it's like a first step, and if you get that kind of thing early into the interview, and you're like, oh, by the way, I had to share, like, I dug through everything and I just love what you guys are working on, and I saw this cool thing in your blog, that immediately kind of softens the tone, and it kicks things off on a fun personal note, and it demonstrates amazing qualities on your part.
I love it, and that was my very first thing as well. It's do your research, do your homework. It's so frustrating to me as an employer when I sit with somebody and I can tell that they've never been to our website, they've never tried to do a Google search on my company, they've never done anything. And as an employer, you sit back in your chair and you think, does this person even want to work here? I mean, and then you contrast that to who you just talked about, who comes into your office and starts talking about something in the blog archive that you don't even remember ever putting out there because it's so old. That person just stands out. A really easy way to do that is to step into the office. You can do it right from the very, very start, but you step into the office and you say, oh, wow, I love your space. I saw pictures of it online and it's so cool in real life. I love this or that. So just making it real and authentic when you have done some research and then you talk about those things, it softens it. It makes it warm and welcoming. I love that. And it makes a huge difference because the employer sits back and says, wow, this person really wants to work here.
Yeah, and if they just interviewed 4 other people that didn't bother doing that, who do you think is
You
going to stick in
stand
their
out.
mind?
Yeah, can make a huge difference. Okay, my second point on this, so research and do your homework is number one. The second thing is position yourself for the opportunity. And this comes along with doing research. You position yourself for the opportunity. So let's say you're a creative and you're trying to get a job at an agency, and you do your research and find that the agency does a lot of work in the healthcare industry. And then you look at your portfolio and you pull out all the healthcare work that you've done and you put it into one location. It could be a PDF, it could be a separate landing page or something, but you put all the healthcare work into one location. And if you don't have any healthcare work, you go and do a spec project that you make up for yourself to do healthcare work, to healthcare design, so that you can show them something that they may have never seen, and you position yourself for the opportunity. So when you sit down at the table for the interview, you can say, I noticed that your agency does a lot of work for healthcare companies. So what I wanted to take you through in this interview is the work that I've done for healthcare companies. Here are 3 projects that I did for healthcare companies. Or, I know that you do a lot of work for healthcare companies, and I haven't done any work for healthcare companies. I've done work for a lot of adjacent types of businesses. But since I haven't done work for healthcare companies, and I know you do a lot of work for healthcare companies, I did an example project that I want to walk you through just to show you my capabilities to do work for the type of client that you service. And then you show them that. So
you're sat there being like, damn, they went the extra mile.
Exactly, man. It makes a huge difference. And people frown on spec work sometimes, you do something like that, but we're talking about a job. Let's say they're going to pay you $60,000 a year and you're going to work there for the next 3 years. Is the 5 hours you'd spend mocking up a fake healthcare project worth $180,000 of salary over the next 3 years? Absolutely worth your time and your risk.
Yeah.
Plus, you can use it for other case study examples in the future as well. So I think position yourself for the opportunity is my next point.
I love it. And I'm going to raise maybe a contentious point here, but I think it's worth discussing before we move on, because I feel like a lot of our points are going to be indicative of go the extra mile.
Yeah.
And something I've noticed is this mindset seems to be way more common and powerful within entrepreneurs than employees, from my experience. So for you and I, it's completely logical to think this way and act this way, but most people just don't. Even some, excellent employees often don't go to these lengths or think outside the box in these ways. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, I've been surprised at how many people that I've interviewed have not done anything of what we've talked about so far.
Yeah, and by the end of this episode, we will probably have a list of like 40 things. And anyone who doesn't want to be an entrepreneur and wants to get hired as an employee would be foolish not to just go through that entire list and do everything. Mm-hmm. But I guarantee most people won't. The same way we give out tons of entrepreneurial advice and most people nod along and don't actually implement it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it's incredibly frustrating to me because I'm like, it's there. You don't even need to think of the ideas. Like, just listen to this episode in the future.
Yeah. Take some notes and then implement.
Yeah. And this is not to, do down anyone on my team. I love my team. They're amazing. But I do think there is a difference in mindset, because I say to them all the time, I have an open door policy. For the people who are super ambitious in the team, come and, come and talk to me. I don't even have a door. It's an open plan office when we're there and not on quarantine. But you know what I mean? I'm like, come and request a chat with me at any point, and I will sit in a room with you for an hour straight and map out your future career growth and how we can fulfill your wildest dreams and ambitions. Basically, no one does it. And if they do it, they don't do it often enough.
Yeah.
And that isn't to say they're not hardworking. They're not amazing. They're not talented. They're not lovely. They're incredible people. But there does seem to just be this gap where most people, for whatever reason, don't operate in that way.
Yeah. Okay, so the takeaway on that is take action. As we're going through these tips, write them down and then pick a few of them, because any one of them will make a difference in your ability to get hired in your next opportunity. You don't always have to implement all 40 ideas that come out of this conversation, but take action on the ones that make the biggest impact for you, or the places that you need to make some improvement.
And also take away the positive that for whatever reason, 99.9% of people won't do what we talk about today. So like, my God, are you going to stand out if you do this stuff?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it's back to me.
Yep, it's back to you.
Cool.
Yep. Wait, Tom is reading something off of his notebook right now for the first time in the history of the Biz Buds podcast. Now go.
might just get, jealous because he's too sluggish mentally. He can't just think on the spot. He needs to pre-prepare. So I'm going to give 1.5 points here.
Okay.
The half point is a follow-on. So the first point I said about do your homework actually extends beyond the role in the company. And you can even, in a non-creepy way, have a little kind of stalky of the people are going to be interviewing you. Case in point, I've only been interviewed twice in my life, and I've never had a job. So I actually didn't go for either of those jobs. I kept doing my own thing. But one of them was for an agency. And I walked in and I was a bit nervous, but immediately I started talking to their CEO about the fact that we both played bass. And I saw that he played bass on his About page, and I went and checked out his social media that was linked from their About page and started chatting about one of his bass songs that he'd written. So again, it showed all the qualities of like, I care, I've done my homework, and it established common ground between us. I then proceeded to basically, in the interview, pull up a projector and then talk them through a redesign of their own agency website that I'd done.
Ambitious.
Yeah, it was a bit much, I think. And so we ended up having that conversation. And so, even with my limited capacity as someone that's been interviewed, I've always kind of tried to think outside the box. So that was like a side note. The main point I wanted to say was often a job description will have key skills. And that is them telling you what they want to hear. It's like when you're at school and you can kind of basically say what the examiner wants to hear to get the good marks.
Yeah.
And so if they're saying the key skills required for this role are, X, Y, Z, well, then you should actually pre-prepare examples and case studies that fit to those key skills, because that's what they want to often know. It's not about sitting there and saying, yes, I'm a hard worker, because I saw that hard work is a requirement for this role or whatever it might be. Or let's say it's like thinking on your feet and being adaptable. They don't want to hear you say, yes, that's me, I'm super adaptable, because that doesn't tell them anything. But if you get to the interview and you can say, yeah, I saw within this role, you're looking for someone really adaptable. This was such a huge part of like the last 5 years of my career. Here's a couple of perfect examples where the shit hit the fan. Mm-hmm. We had to adapt on our feet and we came out like, gleaming on the other side of it.
Mm-hmm. I love it. Okay. So I would distill that takeaway down to read the job description and prepare an interview as if they are not going to ask you any questions. So go in and they say, okay, we want somebody adaptable. So think of the story like Tom just said and write it down, prepare what you would say. Now you sit down at the table for the interview and the interviewer doesn't even ask you a question. You're just prepared to speak to their pain points for this job without them even asking you anything. It's going to make you shine in this interview where you can just sit down and say, okay, thanks for letting me interview here. I prepared a lot of thoughts based on the job description that you wrote up. Do you mind if I just approach those to start? And you kind of start to take that initiative role. Instead of just sitting there at the table like a scared mouse, you take some initiative to start the conversation. It can really, really make you shine in comparison to the other people who don't come in prepared and don't have the conversation already mapped out.
Yeah, I love it.
All right, is it my turn?
Yeah.
Okay. The next one, let's talk about body language for a minute, because this is a big deal. And I'm a big fan of body language and mirroring and things like that. So body language advice for the interview. Number one, make eye contact. Make eye contact with the person who you're meeting. So they come.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
We've had up to like 3 people sometimes interviewing one person, and often it's like they don't know where to look, and I can't blame them because they're looking from person to person to person, and it gives quite a weird vibe. What do you advise they do in that scenario?
Short eye contact, not staring eye contact. So I wouldn't bounce around. So my advice is whoever is talking on their side is the person that you look at the most.
Yeah, and so if one of them asked a question, you'd look at them for most of your answer.
For most of the answer, and then occasionally glance over to engage the other two people in the room.
Yeah.
But yeah, and no eye contact should be the stalker staring kind. This is just normal human. Make sure that intermingled into the conversation you're making eye contact. If it's too much, it makes people feel uncomfortable. If it's not at all, it makes you seem completely insecure.
Yeah.
So eye contact, smile is a big deal. It is a big deal. It will show that you're confident. It will show that you're comfortable. It will emanate your kindness and make the other person feel comfortable around you. Small talk is a big one. Tom talked about this, about the CEO and the bass guitar thing. Small talk is good. I mentioned it. You walk into the office and you say, "Oh, I love your space. I saw this picture on the website," and you just start talking about little things that are around the office.
And positive outlook with that, right?
Oh, that's so
like
good.
You say, instantly you went, "I love your space. It's positive."
Yeah.
Or you're like, "This space is great. Like, how long have you guys been here?"
Yeah.
It's positive. It's enthusiastic.
Yeah. So that small talk piece. And the easiest way to do it is to look around and start talking about specific things at the office. If you see a poster on the wall, make a mention of it. If you see an award sitting on a shelf, make a mention of it. Those just little small talk things about the things that you see around the room.
And sorry to keep interjecting, buddy.
It's good.
If you notice something outside, if you didn't get a chance to mention it, when you then go into the interview room, if you recall that, it can actually show a great eye for detail. So you could have done a minute of small talk. It's like, "Oh, by the way, I think I noticed out there you had this cool award." That's them being like, "Oh, they're very perceptive."
Yeah, I like it. All right, and then the final one I'll say on this, and we could do an entire episode about body language, but the final one is to mirror their body language. This is a standard human-to-human interaction tool that you can use, but you mirror their body language. So if they're sitting back in their chair in the interview, it's okay for you to sit back in your chair. If their elbows are on the table and they're leaning in forward toward you, then lean in toward them as well. If they are sitting cross-legged, then you sit cross-legged. It's okay to mirror, or it's beneficial to mirror their behavior because it makes them feel comfortable and it keeps you in harmony with their tone in the interview. Because you never want to be the one who's kicking back, relaxed, leaning back in your chair in the interview while the interviewer is sitting formally, elbows on the table, leaning forward and talking to you in a more formal manner. You don't want to be you don't want to send the wrong message with your body language. So mirror their body language.
I love that point so much so that I might kind of add to that point as my point.
All right, good.
So what you're talking about is calibration, and I'm a huge fan of this as well. You calibrate your behavior based on their behavior. And I would say a couple of things on that. So first of all, even if you don't love the vibe they're putting out, you should still try and calibrate just as a good practice. You might then walk away from the interview having impressed them with how you've mirrored and all that stuff. But personally, you're like, you know what? They were a bit pushy for me, a bit salesy, not friendly enough. So whilst I calibrated and mirrored effectively, it's probably not a place I want to work. And that's fine too. But yeah, it's crucial to avoid that disconnect that Mike touched on. And I've been in enough interviews, interviewing people where they're just completely on a different wavelength than you are. And that's not pleasant in an interview. It's not good on a date. It's not good like in a meeting. It's not good ever really to feel like you're on totally different wavelengths. And as Mike said, it's not just body language. It is mood, it's energy, it's positivity, it's even language, stuff like that. So I know you're the same as me with this, Mike. I will now do this completely unconsciously, but I do it all the time in thousands of ways. So if I'm talking to someone and they're very eloquent and verbose, then I will, use language more befitting of that. If they're using simpler language, I'll scale it back because I don't want to be condescending to them.
Yeah.
Like
don't be dropping F-bombs if they're not dropping F-bombs. This is the thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
You even if that's your normal style of being, you're not Gary Vaynerchuk.
Yeah.
He's not listening to this podcast, but you've got to harmonize yourself, or calibrate was the word you use, calibrate yourself to the style of person that they are. Yeah.
Hugely. And this is just such a skill in business. So whilst I don't go for interviews myself, I do business development every single day, and it's all me. But I could have 8 calls in a day, and it's almost like I'm being 8 different people. And I know that might sound disingenuous, but it never feels it for a second. It doesn't for them, and it doesn't for me. Because if I'm talking to like the sweet old lady that has like a stay-at-home business and has a certain tonality, and then next I talk to the startup frat boy who's like, yeah, man, let's make it happen. My vibe's completely different for both of them. But it's still me, the same way I'm going to be different when I hang out with my grandma versus when I hang out with like my friends at my bachelor party.
Yeah, good example. Good example. I like it. Calibrate. Okay, is it my turn or was that?
Yeah.
Okay, next one for me is take notes. Man, bring a notebook, not your laptop, but bring a notebook and a pen and take some notes, because it shows your genuine interest in the opportunity. When the other person is talking, the interviewer, the potential employer is talking, you are jotting down some little notes in your notebook. And it makes a huge difference. I'm so surprised at some people who come into the interview, and I'm the interviewer, and I'm taking notes in the interview, and they're the potential applicant who wants me to hire them, and they're not taking notes at all. I'm sitting there thinking, what is the disconnect here? I see what you're saying is valuable to me. I want to remember it, and you're just banking on your memory. Man, take some notes. It's going to show genuine interest.
It will. I would add a caveat to that I would actually ask permission in a polite way. Because if I interviewed someone and they were just kind of scribbling away like they were a detective interviewing me, I might find that slightly jarring. But if they framed it in the right way, I'd find it super impressive. So if it were me being interviewed, I'd be like, by the way, do you mind if I take a couple of notes? Because I really want to try and soak everything in that we talk about today. Is that cool?
Good.
You know?
I like it. Always asking permission is always valuable, for sure.
My point is be real, because you can get very robotic if you do all of this stuff. If you go in and you're like, so I'm shaking the hand. Oh, we didn't talk about handshakes, by the way. Never the limp fish. That sucks.
Oh, man.
And equally, never the aggressive, break their knuckles.
Exactly.
Just brief, firm, look them in the eye, smile, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, be real, because otherwise you're going in, you're going to be like handshake, smile, eye contact. What a lovely office. It's going to come across a little bit weird, right? So you need to try and loosen up and be yourself. And we've interviewed and hired people, and we have some exceptional team members now, where the interview was, I don't want to say train wreck because that's harsh, but it was not their best self.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking of a couple of people in particular, super nervous, like painfully nervous. You know, they felt embarrassed at how nervous they were. But I looked at them and I thought, you seem like a great person. And we all get nervous, and maybe interviews aren't your thing.
Yeah.
But I think actually you'd be a great cultural fit. I see the little glimmers of your real personality underneath the nerves, and you just strike me as incredibly genuine. And someone being genuine and truthful is a huge deal for me as an employer, because I've had other people where they've actually kind of nailed the interview on paper, but I just get this weird vibe off them where I'm like, I don't know if I fully trust everything you're telling me, or I fully trust in you as a person. I'd much rather have the nervous deer in headlights person where I'm like, I believe every word you say.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, I've had the same. I mean, it's hard because I was hiring a lot of designers and programmers, and designers and programmers can be massively talented but terrible people. It just depends. I mean, some of them are amazing people, but you'll have people that'll struggle in an interview for sure, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to get the job just because you don't have the good small talk. So if
sorry, actually, just on that point, I think being honest about that can actually be endearing. So not a train wreck, not like, oh my God, I'm terrible, but just saying, sorry, by the way, like, I love the look of your company. I really think like I'd be a great fit here and I'd work super hard. I have to admit, I am super nervous, and I'm sure that's coming across. And I just wanted to acknowledge that elephant in the room.
I love that. And I have people do that now when they do coaching sessions with me. They get on the first coaching session and they're nervous on the coaching session. I'm like, you don't have to be nervous. I'm not nervous at all, and I'll make you feel comfortable. So don't worry about anything. But when they say it in that very first moment, all of a sudden it makes me react to it and say, it's okay. You're going to be fine. We're going to get through this. Everything's going to be okay. And all of a sudden you have built a good dynamic between you and the potential candidate, or you with the potential employer. So I like that advice. Really, really great. The next one that I have is 3 smart questions. Bring with you 3 smart questions to the interview. And those questions come from your research. So you go in to the interview and you say, one of the questions might be, well, tell me, who's your biggest client? What is your most successful product? Do you have an 80-20 in your business where 80% of your revenue is coming from 20% of your customers? What's your 80-20? These are all great, smart questions that you can ask the potential employer. I cannot count the number of times that I have said at the end of an interview, well, so do you have any questions for me, the potential employer?
And they go, nope, sorry.
Exactly. They say
good,
no.
right?
It's almost always, man. I mean, we're talking about maybe 10 or 15% of the potential candidates actually have a question for me.
Yep.
And I always look at that and say, how can you not have any questions for me? You're wanting to work here for the next 1 to 10 years. And you don't have a question for me about our culture, about our benefits package, about our business, about our clients, about our processes. There's no question. And it's such a missed opportunity, because I want the question. And it's a great opportunity for the potential candidate to show their research, show their business acumen, show their attention to detail by asking 3 smart questions.
I love that. And maybe this is my fragile ego, but where I don't like it is when they kind of weirdly turn into the interviewer and get carried away with it and give a strange vibe there. And I've had people, like you say, the minority actually bother to do this. The best way to do it, in my opinion, is still where you're kind of doing it with humility and eagerness and positivity.
Yeah.
So it's like, have you got any questions? Actually, yeah. Like, I love everything you guys are doing right now, and I got some indication from your website, but I'd love to know what the kind of broad plan is for the next few years, what that vision is. And hopefully I can, buy into that and be part of that. Like, I'd love that kind of thing as a question. What I don't like is where people sit back and like, now you mention it, I do have a question or 3. And they roll their sleeves up and they sit back like, so why do you want to employ me? And they start like firing questions at you, and they get really carried away. And it's moments like that where I kind of look over at my business partner and like fellow interviewer with a wry smile and be like, I'm getting a strange vibe here.
Yeah.
Have you had that?
Okay. Yeah. I think that there's a good balance. It's the right type of question for sure. So ask questions that directly apply to your involvement in the company. So Tom gave a great example.
Don't make it feel like you're interviewing them and putting them on the spot to make them feel nervous or uncomfortable.
Yeah. Tell me what your profit margin was last year. And it's what are the goals of the business for the next few years, and how do you anticipate the person you hire to help contribute to that? That's a good question. Here's another good question. Tell me about the team that I would be working in. How is it structured? How many people are in the team? Who would I be reporting to? That kind of thing. And what's that culture like within the team? What are those kinds of people like? Would I be a good fit for that team? That's a great question. It's a smart question, and it directly applies to you and your potential fit in the company.
Yeah. What one I've got in the past, which I really liked, was, what's the single biggest thing that you look for in a new team member in terms of like their personality and their character?
Question. Yeah. Great question.
Cool.
All right.
I think
It's your turn.
we've got about 5 minutes, so we
Okay.
can rapid fire a couple of points. Shall
All
we
right.
do the next episode actually as the interviewer? Because we didn't even get to that.
Would it be much different? Let's talk about that offline.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. We could talk about any of these things for days. So
all right, I'll tell you
Yeah.
what. Let's not do a whole episode. I might give my final point as our interview process,
okay.
if that's helpful for people, because it's taken 6.5 years to refine this. Originally, we would have a bunch of people in for interview. We hadn't done enough due diligence, so there would be a lot of time wasted with unsuitable people. And then I had this weird thing. I think I was like even more of a people pleaser in the early years, being completely truthful. So I would almost be I'd talk more than they talked, which is an error. And I'd try and oversell our company to them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Rather than them sell themselves to me. So I'm like, oh, we're great. I promise we're really good here. Like,
Yeah.
Because, we weren't so established, and I was almost like insecure in that respect. So now what we do is we have a phone interview up front after screening their resume, of course. So if they get through that stage, they get a phone interview.
Mm-hmm.
If the phone interview goes well, then they come in for an in-person interview, and it'll be me and like one or two other people. We go through the whole interview process. If the interview goes well, we say, oh, by the way, when interviews tend to go pretty well like this and we hit it off, we do a thing where we sit down and hang out with the team for 10, 15 minutes. And this is the casual part of the interview. So they're all going to sit in a circle with you and each fire a random question at you. And it's like the most bizarre stuff. It would be like, if you had to be a fruit, like, what piece of fruit would you be?
So
and
fun.
What's your favorite movie and all that kind of stuff. And they'd sit in a circle, and I will just sit back and watch this happen and watch how they interact with the team and how they engage with them and their answers. And it can be super telling, and you can see if they hit it off with the team and if they don't. And then after that, and this is a crucial piece, we actually generally get them to come in and do a trial shift for like either 2 to 4 hours. Because sometimes people nail the interview, they're a good cultural fit, but they show up and when they actually do the work, they're terrible, or they don't live up to the hype. And it's a bit longer and more drawn out, but we found it saves so much time, and it means you don't then have to fire someone a week in because they're not what you expected or whatever.
Yeah.
And it serves so well to really filter out the good quality people where they tick every single box of character and culture and work ethic. And since doing this, the last few hires we've made have been some of the strongest we've ever made. Like, I couldn't be happier.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. I've been in that experience a couple times early in my career. The questions from the team thing and just random questions and stuff. And I actually liked it. It's a good fit for
fun.
my personality. So it was fun for me to interact that way. But I think that's a great way to see the true colors of somebody.
Yeah.
I have a couple of final points that we didn't touch on. The first one that I'll say is send a thank you note. And I had a potential it was a potential client of ours that we did a discovery session with. And then 1 hour later, they sent a thank you to our agency for the discovery session. And the thank you was a handwritten note, but it was emailed in to us. So it was so great. It had the immediacy of email correspondence where we received it in an hour, but it had the personalization of a handwritten note. So you handwrite the note. Thanks so much for the interview. I loved meeting you. Take a picture of it, email it to the potential interviewer, and you get the best of both worlds. You get the immediacy of email with the personalization of handwritten. And I thought it was such a great idea. So I highly recommend that approach to people. How would you feel, Tom, if you had received that?
We received similar. So someone actually listened to one of my other podcasts where I advocate for these personal touches. Yeah. They sent us a job application referencing how much the podcast had impacted them and how it inspired them to make this gesture. It was a box of treats and like handmade things and a handmade brochure for us. It was like the most thoughtful thing ever. Yeah. And I might have mentioned this before. The guy, Benji, he connected with me on LinkedIn recently as well. We weren't hiring, So I actually had to say to him, Benji, we haven't even got a job. Otherwise, I would freaking hire you because this is amazing. But as a thank you for the gesture, myself and our creative director took him out for lunch, coached him for an hour on, how to get a foot in the door somewhere. And 2 weeks later, he went and got one of his dream jobs. And he's still in touch with us now.
That's awesome. Good. All right. I like it. So that personal touch and a thank you is so valuable. And then the last one I'll say is 35 and 1. 30 applications yields 5 interviews, yields 1 job. So while you're out there applying to places, don't get discouraged after you've sent 10 applications and you haven't gotten an interview yet, because you have to look at it and say, I've got to apply to 30 places to get 5 interviews to land 1 job. And I've had people reach out to me in coaching, in a coaching scenario, saying, oh, I've been applying to jobs and I haven't gotten anything. I'm starting to get discouraged. And I'll say, how many jobs have you applied for? And they'll say, well, I applied for 3 last week. And I'm like, 3? 3's not going to get you a job. You've got to be thinking 30 and then get 5 interviews and get 1 job opportunity. So keep those ratios in mind. And as a potential employer, it's the same thing. You're going to look at 30 applicants, you're going to interview 5 of them, and you'll probably find the one that you want to hire out of that batch.
I mostly agree. Something I hate is when people spread themselves too thin and go generic though. And you can tell it's like they've sent 500 resumes out there. Dear company who may concern,
exactly.
I'd be a great fit. I hate that. That's straight in the bin. It's a waste of paper.
Yeah.
So I'm actually a fan of going slightly smaller than like the 30 applications.
Well, take 30 and spread it. I hear you, but take 30 and spread it over a month of time. You can apply in a custom fashion to one job a day for 30 days.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. You shouldn't expect, so that's a better approach than applying to 10 jobs per day for like 3 days. Mm-hmm. And that's your 30 applications. Yeah. 1 personalized application per day for 30 days to find your position.
Yeah, because what you're talking about is essentially a conversion rate. Mm-hmm. And your conversion rate goes dramatically up when you do all of the personal touches and extra mile stuff that we've alluded to. Yeah. And that isn't just in the interview. Obviously, you need to make it to the interview. So, how can you customize your resume and your portfolio and everything that you submit? How can you customize that for that company?
Yeah.
Can you do a custom cover letter for your resume that calls out everything you love about their company and indicates some of the homework you've done? Like, go bespoke, go deep, and dramatically increase your odds.
Yeah, I like it.
Cool, man. That was a fun one.
Yeah, it was fun. I did think of one last point that will be my closing sermon. My closing sermon is,
preach.
It is okay to not get the job. You're not looking for just a job. You're looking for an opportunity that is a good fit for you, where you fit into their organization, you fill the void of their organization. It's a value exchange where you're providing value to them and they're compensating you appropriately to you. And if that does not fit for whatever reason, it's okay to not get the job offer. It opens the door for you to have the right job offer later. So don't get discouraged when you don't get the job offer, because there are a lot of moving parts that go into a hiring decision. And you certainly don't want somebody to hire you when you're not the right fit for their organization. So don't get discouraged. Keep applying. Every time somebody tells you no, it is because that was not the greatest opportunity for you right now. And the next one might be it.
Mic drop. I just realized that's your name.
Yeah.
Literally mic drop.
Yeah.
It's going to be when I try and pick up your massive frame when we finally meet and give you a bear hug. All right, man. I enjoyed that. I got to run myself, unfortunately, but thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Thank you to all the Biz Buddies out there. We always say this. We appreciate you a ton. After the True Fans episode back in episode 9, we got so many DMs, and we've literally been like cracking up and like, having good chats with the listeners. And so I know all of those people are listening right now.
So
and
good,
like, we
man. Those
love
have been
you guys.
so fun.
Yeah.
One of our favorites is Rachel. Shout out to Rachel, who we've been trading video messages, and our little group chat has been so fun. And so we do appreciate our listeners, and thank you for your support. It means the world to us. And like Tom said, reach out anytime. We appreciate comments and feedback, reviews on the Biz Buds podcast on Apple Podcasts.
And leave your Instagram handle. If you leave a review, we want to personally shout you out, call you out, and thank you as well.
Yes, great. All right. Thank you, Biz Buddies, for listening, and we will be back with you next week on a new episode of the Biz Buds podcast.